Good morning. I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche Organization with your daily video update for May 9th, 2025. Well, today is the day that we celebrate the victory over the Nazis in Europe in World War II. It's called Victory Day in Moscow. It's being ignored in most European capitals, or actually you might see a celebration of the Nazis if you look closely. But what Russia is celebrating is honoring those who fought in World War II to defeat the Nazis. And it was an American-Russian alliance, but especially the efforts of the Soviets, which ended the Hitler regime. Now, the autocrats of Brussels are denouncing the Victory Day celebration in Moscow, denouncing it as a gathering of autocrats. This from the autocrats of the European Union, who are trying to shut down elections, for example, in Romania, or shut down leading political parties like the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany, because the victors in these elections don't fit their view of what democracy is. But what's important to note is that the Russians declared a ceasefire for 3 days. It seems to be largely holding, even though Zelensky threatened to rain down drones on the parade in Red Square. Meanwhile, Ursula von der Leyen and the other Eurocrats are going to gather in Kiev tomorrow, where they're going to proclaim their solidarity with the regime that was brought to power by the military force of a neo-Nazi militia at Maidan Square in February 2014. And it's worth noting that the heirs of the Stefan Bandera Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, the Galician SS, are being unmentioned by von der Leyen, Kallas, and that crew while they gather in Kiev to celebrate the unelected dictator Zelensky, or I should say puppet Zelensky. Now, the first question for today, since it's Friday, was sent to me by Alfredo, who asked, don't the European Union officials recognize the horrible irony of marching with neo-Nazis on a date commemorating the defeat of Hitler's Third Reich? Well, it's possible they don't recognize it. They may be deaf and blind to the reaction of the rest of the world to their dishonesty and their actually treachery, but I would say it's much more a case of delusion and arrogance. They actually believe that they have a right to dictate policy to the world, which they've been doing through the International Monetary Fund, the World Economic Forum, the World Trade Organization, and so on. That world is coming to an end. They don't want to see it end. And so, of course, they're blinding themselves to the reality and making up stories and protecting those stories with censorship. But the reality is, what are they doing? They're engaging in a €1 trillion plus military rearmament campaign, which is called by von der Leyen Rearm Europe. And why target Russia? Well, because the Western system of a unipolar order is collapsing, and a new system is emerging. A new system which is multipolar, which is not based on an imperial power dictating to all the peons. So not only is their system collapsing, but their governments are unpopular. You look at the problem in Germany, where Merz was sworn in as chancellor with less than 25% support in the country. You look at Macron, whose popularity rating may be in the teens. Starmer, who is widely proclaimed to be the most unpopular British Prime Minister ever. And that's saying a lot considering you had Liz Truss and Boris Johnson just preceding him. But if you want to look at the future of Europe, under the European Union green transition, sanctions policy against Russia, commitment to war, look what happened this week, or the last weekend, with the electric grid in the Iberian Peninsula. It collapsed because the green policy doesn't work. And until that's recognized, these arrogant establishment figures are going to continue to push their global disorder and try to strong-arm any regime, any government which doesn't go along with it. Now, the second question was, how does the LaRouche Organization view the present crisis between India and Pakistan? Well, let me be very blunt. It's extremely dangerous. You have a mobilization of both the Indian government and the Pakistani government. You have armies in motion. You have mobilization. You have planes being shot down, drones being launched. This has all the dangerous potential of blowing up to be a nuclear confrontation between two nuclear powers. Now, the bigger question, or the two bigger questions, are first of all, why did this happen? And secondly, how do you solve it? Now, this is typical of the long-term effects of the policies of the British Empire. Remember, India and Pakistan were part of the Indian subcontinent, the jewel of the empire. And what the British did when they left the subcontinent was divide things up in such a way that there would be a constant confrontation between a Muslim majority in Pakistan and a Hindu majority in India. Typical divide and conquer. This is what geopolitics was about. This was the great game carried out by the British lords and ladies of the empire. Now, this was inevitable in a sense because the underlying confrontation is over water, it's over resources, and they've been using it to try to split the developing countries, including the BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, to split them up to prevent the emergence of a new architecture. That's classic British geopolitics. And we see this functioning in the same way in Southwest Asia. Again, it was the British who carved up the region in Southwest Asia, going back to the Sykes-Picot Agreement of 1916, the Balfour Declaration of 1917, the British Mandate over Palestine. All of these British colonies, which were hard to govern, but instead of developing the economy of these countries, they were kept in a colonial servitude. And as a result, you have these kinds of antagonisms, so-called identities, in conflict. This is the clash of civilization strategy which continued beyond Mackinder and Lord Milner and others through the teachings of people like Samuel Huntington. So this is what we're dealing with. This is the strategy of empire. Let the peons fight the wars while the looting continues. Now, the solution to both is joint economic development, which is what the BRICS are trying to do, which is what the global majority is moving toward. Break with the geopolitics of the great game. And it would help if the United States would commit itself to work with the BRICS in parallel for a new strategic and development architecture. Now, for a more in-depth strategic discussion, I have some links in the description section of my conversation with Helga Zepp-LaRouche last Wednesday, and also today at 11 a.m. Eastern will be the 101st continuing Zoom call of the International Peace Coalition. So the links are there for those. Now finally, I got a few questions this morning from people who asked, would you make some comments about the papal election, the new Pope, Leo XIV? It's too soon. We'll take a deeper look at it over the next couple of days, but there was one hopeful sign that I've seen very little mention of, which is the choice of the name Leo XIV after Pope Leo XIII, who was the Pope at the end of the 19th century. What's significant about Leo XIII was his encyclical Rerum Novarum, in which he laid out a strategy of economic justice, in which he attacked both socialism and unregulated free market capitalism, and instead spoke about the dignity of man, the dignity of labor, the importance of the productive power of every individual being able to fulfill their creative potential. That's a good sign. That was one of the most important encyclicals. And if this is what the new Pope is looking toward, it would be very hopeful. But of course, with all the narratives and all the confetti that's thrown up around these things, is he a conservative? Is he a liberal? Is he another Francis? Well, we'll see. But the important thing is that a new Pope has been chosen. It's a chance for 1.4 billion Catholics to reflect on the importance of the mission of Christ and why that should be the essential direction of the Catholic population. So again, let me call your attention to the International Peace Coalition Dialogue today, 11 a.m. Eastern. There's a link in the description box. If you can't make it live, you can always log on later and hear the discussion. There have been some extremely interesting discussions recently, and many of the people who you hear at the IPC will be joining us on May 24th and 25th for the International Schiller Institute Conference in the New York City area. And I'll have a link to register for that also. So thanks for joining me this week. It's been a momentous week, lots going on, and lots of reasons why every one of you should be joining us, reproducing our literature, and going out and engaging in statecraft, organizing your friends to function as citizens